This is Michael Douville, and this is Creating Wealth. And we are so fortunate today to have a biblical scholar, Paul Lehr of paulandthepope.com. He's here to discuss how prophecy is validating what's going on in today's world and how what was written is now coming true. And I want to say thank you very much, Paul, for coming and joining us today. I want to ask you a couple things. We've got some slides. So what is this first slide that we've got to talk about? This is probably one of the most important ones. This is an old map, is it not?
Well, I think this is a map from the late 1874. And this is very instrumental when we start looking at the prophecies, because this is how these people viewed the world, say, 150 years ago. And you see all these ancient names on this map. And so, from our standpoint, it's like, well, we have these ancient names. So what does that correspond to in regards to modern day countries? So two parts of this. So as we look at this map, the fundamental prophecy we're going to look at is Ezekiel 38 and 39. And the cliff notes of this is that modern day Russia, the ancient name is Magog, is going to be led by this character named Gog of Magog. And we see that from Ezekiel 38 verses 1 through, and we're looking at Ezekiel 38 verse 6. So Gog of Magog is up here between the two seas, between the Black and the Caspian Sea, and that pretty much is modern day Russia. And modern day Russia even claims to be Magogians, or as the Greeks called them, the Scythians. And so you can read papers today. I think it was Sputnik put some things out. They classified themselves as modern day Scythians, modern day Magogians. They claim to be these people. So to me, there's not much of a debate as to who that one is. And so there will be a leader that will emerge from Magog. His biblical name is Gog, and he will lead a coalition of nations. And then you get the ancient names here from Ezekiel 38:6, Gomer and all of his hordes. Well, you can see Gomer is mentioned, where is modern day Turkey. You can also see Gomer in the middle of the map, just below where Togarmah is. And Beth Togarmah and Togarmah, so Beth, house of Togarmah, that's an ancient name of what is modern day Turkey. Turkey refers to themselves to this day as Beth Togarmah, house of Togarmah. So there's that piece of it. And then I think if we look at Meshech and Tubal, and I think that's from slide 2, if I'm not mistaken, from what we were talking about earlier. The word of the Lord came to me saying, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And so Meshech and Tubal, if we go back to the first map from slide 1, that's pretty much modern day Armenia. And if you look at what's going on in today's geopolitical climate, Russia, Vladimir Putin he's tight with modern day Armenia. Also, if you look at recent history, the Republic of Georgia sits between the Black Sea, on the coast of the Black Sea, and Putin has taken some liberty and some land there where he can move resources along the Black Sea to get down into what is Armenia and Turkey. And so moving this thing along quickly, so you have Russia, who will be joined by Persia, which is modern day Iran. And then you have these four names we're discussing, modern day Turkey, also joined by arguably what is Libya, or Put, as the Bible calls it. And then Ethiopia, which is the section that is south of what is modern day Egypt, which would be the Sudan or the country of Ethiopia. And you can see the southern part of that prophecy starting to come into shape as well too. Russia's got its fingers in there, and that's a discussion for another day. But all these people, all these countries are moving together, and they are coming together, and they are forming military coalitions, economic coalitions, and political coalitions together. So,
well, Paul, can I ask you, is there indication that Putin may be Gog?
Well, that's difficult to know. He acts Gog-esque in that sense. You know, it does say that this leader God will put a jaw, or put a hook in his jaw, and bring him about from the uttermost parts of the north. So there are only two options from the uttermost parts of the north from Israel. It's either Turkey or it's Russia. He's an arrogant sort, according to the Bible, and he's wanting to come in for military, or not for military, but for economic purposes. It's stated over and over, and I think that's from slide 7. You can get a little bit of an attitude of who this character is. Text states over and over and over, it's to steal, take plunder.
Well, of course, that has many different definitions too of plunder. It doesn't necessarily mean barbarians at the gate. We can also have some economic problems as well. So I think what you're saying is eventually it's going to become barbarians at the gate, where they're actually going to overrun the country. Is that correct?
Pretty much. They're going to bring all these countries together. And the text talks about seize, spoil, carry off plunder, take livestock, goods, who dwell in the center of the earth, come to seize, spoil, carry off plunder, carry away silver, gold, to take away livestock and goods. And then the last phrase, it says to seize great spoil. And to me, that great spoil is going to be the natural gas and oil reserves that Israel has found off the coast of their waters in the Mediterranean. They have some of the largest gas reserves. You know, the attitude that you're seeing being displayed, and Putin has made this known publicly in a lot of his publications, you know, Russian news sources as well as other news sources throughout that part of the world. He wants to control the oil and gas flow and the economic commerce to Western Europe. And they're already starting to have problems this winter. He's cut supply, he's cut gas inventories, and they're literally 2/3 to 3/4 of what they were from last year. Things are starting to turn cold. These people are starting to freeze, and a lot of it has to do over, he wants to ship oil and gas with his pipeline, the Nord Stream, and he wants to control the economic flow of it. And if you follow every place Putin's going right now, so when he goes and he sticks his nose in Libya, Libya is the largest oil and gas producer in Africa. Like right now, he's got his nose in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a major oil and gas exporter. And in fact, I was reading something last night that Kazakhstan is one of the largest oil exporters and producer to China. So you can
see huge reserves, reserves.
Yes.
So we're talking about not a lot of oil. And if I could just interrupt, we're talking about, when you talk about the gas and oil, this is in this region here, just south of Cyprus. Is it not?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit further south of there. Yeah.
And I believe, if I remember correctly, Erdogan from Turkey was sending his warships over here to Cyprus and south of Cyprus, claiming that this area here actually belonged to Turkey, because he wanted that gas and oil as well. Right. And of course, it's nowhere near Turkey. But I don't believe that Turkey itself has a lot of oil and gas. So and I've noticed that Erdogan and Putin have gotten to be pretty chummy lately. Have they? They have
been. They're signing all kinds of agreements. You know, and to dovetail on your comment too about Turkey and Erdogan wanting to stick their nose into what's going on in Cyprus. Cyprus will be a future hub for how Israel wants to distribute their natural gas reserves. They're going to be an energy exporter to Western Europe, and they want to send their natural gas through Cyprus and then connect that with a pipeline in Greece, in this modern day town called Thessaloniki, which would be, as we know it in the Bible, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. So all these places that are written about, you know, gosh, in the case of the New Testament, close to 2,000 years ago, and what we're talking about in Ezekiel 2,700 years ago or so, all these places are showing up in modern day headlines again. So, I mean, Israel wants to run their natural gas through to Cyprus, which cuts into what you're talking about with Erdogan. And then from there, it gets distributed to Greece and into Thessaloniki. And from there, it goes to what is Italy. And once it gets to Italy, then those folks can purchase natural gas resources in Western Europe. So it's all about money.
Well, and of course, with Putin, He has a huge gas and oil reserves himself. He's very, very close here. And you're exactly right. It would be so much nicer if he monopolized all that. He could really hold Europe for hostage, could he not? So
Absolutely.
taking the oil and gas, that would certainly be plunder, I would think, in biblical terms. So all this comes together. He's already in Syria, is he not?
He is. He first got into Syria. The Syrian civil war started in, I believe it was 2011. So I'm sure you folks remember the Arab Spring of 2011, and that's when the civil war started in many Middle East countries, also across northern Africa. And at that time, the push was, the United States policy at that time was to get rid of the current sitting president out of Syria. Bashar hasn't worked. He's still there. Russia wants to keep him in place because it benefits them economically. If they can control him, they can control the flow of oil into the Mediterranean and how it gets to Western Europe. So, and within 4 years, Russia started sending troops into northern Syria by, I want to say, December 2015 or so.
2015, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
October 2015 is when they first started arriving, the first contingents.
And within 3 or 4 months, they literally have troops down there on the Golan Heights. So you got all kinds of action happening on the Golan Heights, and scripturally they say that's where where the invasion is going to come from, from the mountains. Well, there's only one place where there are mountains in the north of Syria, or of Israel, and that's in the Syrian border through the Golan Heights. And so,
I think right through here, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Just drop south. Also, Russia has a port now in Latakia in Syria. Lebanon's in free fall. Their currency's fallen. I want to say last night I saw on the black market, it's anywhere from 35,000 lira to $1. So they're having issues, the same issues we're going to talk about in Turkey.
Yeah.
The lights got turned out again this weekend in Lebanon, so the whole country's just sitting there in the dark.
Let's go to the next slide and just take a look at this. This is what you're going to run right into when you start talking about their currencies. So this is the revelations that we were talking about.
Absolutely, and this is put this in context. Revelation was written off the coast of what is modern day Turkey, and it was written to the churches, which the churches were Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, and Philadelphia, Laodicea, and they are towns, ancient towns in what is modern day Western Turkey. And so if you're reading this with the understanding this was written to an audience, which is modern day Turkey. The focus is going to go down. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come," and I looked, and behold, a black horse. And its rider had a pair of scales in his hands. And economically, this is what we're interested in. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius." So back in the day, so we're talking about 2,000 years ago, a denarius was a day's wage. So this is talking about it's going to cost you a day's wage to eat. And so roughly a quart of wheat is what would feed a family. And so it'll take a day's wage to feed yourself and your family. And that says, "Do not harm the oil and the wine." And many people take that to mean, okay, leave the rich alone for right now. These are the folks, leave the haves alone, but the have-nots are going to be paying a pretty hefty penalty. It's going to cost them a day's wage to eat.
Wow, does that roll right into what's going on today,
Absolutely.
Paul? Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Of course, we have inflation here in the United States. It doesn't look like it's quote unquote transitory by any means. But what's going on in Turkey, you have to your heart's got to go out to these people.
They're getting
really,
crushed.
really awful. So let me just go to the next slide, because the next slide is going to kind of transition us from ancient prophecy into what's going on in modern day. And it's very, very interesting how they dovetail right into each other. And it's just like a roadmap that's unfolding before us. So let me just go to the next slide. This is I just got this from zero hedge, I think. And this is just talking about the US dollar versus the Turkish lira. And of course, everything in the world is expressed in US dollars because we're the reserve currency. So oil is expressed in US dollars, wheat is expressed in US dollars, rice, barley, flour after it's been milled, and energy, oil, all in US dollars. So Turkey has lost 44% of purchasing power against the US dollar. So not only has oil had a lot of demands on it, so we've had rising demand, which causes price to go up. But if your currency is devaluing against the US dollar, that means that it's inflating internally. And this is what's happening in Turkey, right alongside of your prophecy, Paul.
Well, that's the thing too with the prophecy. This is at the onset of what is a 7-year period of a literal hell on earth. So that's one of the things that, personally, I pay real close attention to, the economics, and that's frankly how I got to know you, is looking at conditions that lead to hyperinflation, and that will be the kind of at the start of when this all goes down. So it stands to reason. Inflation is just not going to show up overnight. There'll be a trend. We'll be able to see it coming to some degree. So economically, I'm always interested in, and especially in parts of the world like the Middle East, Turkey, countries surrounding Israel. What's their economic status? How are economics in those countries? Because the Bible talks about, before everything goes down, one of the onsets, one of the things that we'll be able to see taking place will be hyperinflation.
Well, you're right. It didn't start. You can see that it was pretty stable for a long time, right around 6 or 7 lira to the dollar. And then you start seeing a problem coming to it. And then you started getting higher and higher and higher. And that's a loss of confidence, really, in the government itself, so that people start losing confidence in the ability of your central government to maintain order and to be sure that they can get imports and regulate the economy. And Erdogan has had many military adventures, if I'm not mistaken, using a lot of his reserves to go into Syria. He went into Iraq too, did he not? He sent his warships after Cyprus. I think he's even talking about going into Libya. So he's had a lot of military intervention. And here's the interesting thing on my side, Paul, is that he's tried to prop up the Turkish lira right here. You can see the interventions here. You can see where he came in and took his US dollars, that was his reserves, and bought Turkish lira to try and support the dollar. It did work. You can see where it dropped right down, where they spent billions and billions of US dollars to try and stabilize the local currency. And of course, it just came right back up. And it has gone to almost, it went to 18 or so. So figure it went from about 7 to 18, which means that if you are getting medicine, some kind of a heart drug, or you needed a diabetes drug, and it was expressed in US dollars, that means it almost tripled in local currency for you to get that. And of course, that's pretty hard on a lot of the locals. One also has to wonder how much currency is left to support his lira. So this dovetails right back in what you're talking about, Paul.
Well, yeah, he's got his hands out across the Middle East too. He's been reaching out to a lot of different Gulf states. Hey, I need some money. And I know he's spent some of his gold reserves as well. And that goes back to Ezekiel 38, speculation and just wondering on my part, but it almost, when you have a leader, Gog of Magog, and it talks about he will lead, what are those ancient names for modern day Turkey, is that if we don't see either a Turkish economic collapse that leads Russia to step in and prop them up economically, because they've already got resources moving in and through the country. But that's going to be Russia's economic power play. It's like, look, I'll support you guys economically, and do the same thing in Syria, and do the same thing in Lebanon. And then he's got all of his troops. He's got money to back these people up. And then they form a coalition that will help them go into Israel. I mean, is that how that's going to go down? I don't know the answer to that, but it's plausible, and it seems reasonable when you look at the economics.
Well, energy is certainly what you need. I mean, energy is used throughout the world, and they're sitting on just a ton of energy. And what I've been hearing too is that the Turkish government itself is actually going into a lot of savings accounts and taking dollars held by private parties. I'm hearing that they've been selling gold. I don't know that this has been endorsed or told the public that they've actually done that. I noticed that today it came out that they were taking 25% of corporations' dollar reserves to prop up the lira as well, just confiscating them. So what, Paul? What would happen if Turkey actually collapsed? What would happen to the people?
Well, I think they'd be in big trouble. Probably be some internal chaos, but I think that's where it speaks to Russia stepping in and propping the whole situation up. And I keep wondering if we're going to see that happen, because how long can this continue to go? I've been frankly pretty amazed watching how this has taken place in Lebanon and how they continue to spiral economically. And
well, it takes a lot of money to send troops and tanks and support to a military adventure. I mean, it takes a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars to do that. And I don't know that he's economically strong enough. Let's go to our next slide and talk about that one. And we're talking about inflation. So the financial forecast for Turkey for the entire year of 2022 is 40% plus inflation. You should start to see capital flows, where you see capital flows flowing out of Turkey going into almost anywhere else. And you'd want to get into some kind of precious metal or in some kind of real asset for sure on this. But this looks like your prophecy of inflation is coming true, particularly for Turkey. I mean, these guys are a poster child for bad management.
right. And he's ready to double down on it. He's like, oh yeah, well, let's cut interest rates more. Let's cut interest rates more, and then let's do some like bond swap for cash to the people. They're not buying it either. They're hoarding dollars because they know at least that's going to be more real than what they have currently. And I think you also had sent me a slide too showing the inflation of food, just how much the cost of food. And yeah, there it is right there, second from the left. And that's the one that makes me think about what's written in Revelation 6. I mean, if you're in Turkey and it talks about, a day's wage just to eat, look what's leading the charge there. To me, I find that real interesting. And that's the kind of stuff that catches my eye. We start having food shortages, and it's not so much even food shortages now too, just looking at how much the distribution supply chain things have affected the price of stuff. If you don't have people to drive ships and drive trains and trucks to deliver goods, that's going to drive things up as well. And that's not even being factored into some of this stuff in the sense that we've just been talking about currency issues and how that affects the price. Well, what if you don't have workers to deliver these goods? That's going to drive the price of these things even higher. So
sure, yeah, you can have wheat growing in the plains, and you need to get it to the mill. And if you can't get it to the mill, that causes a food shortage. And of course, nothing is going to drive the population to desperation more than not being able to feed your kids.
Right.
And of course, you need to keep the lights on. And as you can see, all your energy costs, these are the two things that really virtually everybody uses, is energy and food. So if you've got a car in Turkey, you can see that's taking they just raised the price, I think 25 or 50%. I think if you were a resident, it went up 50%, but if you were a business, it went up 125% just to keep the lights on. And I think that was electricity and natural gas, and gasoline has gone up. But of course, just feeding your family, but we have just feeding your family is not enough, because we still put them to school. We've got medical costs, we've got clothing, we've got, normal life. The Turkish are just like us. They want their families to prosper and have fun and get married and have kids. And nothing is going to drive them to desperation than not being able to do that. And this is my concern, Paul. You and I talked about this off camera, was that Erdogan is not going to accept blame. You can see that with the central bank. He keeps firing his central bankers. If you don't agree with him, he just gets rid of you. And it's never his fault. It's going to be somebody else's fault. And the more desperate his population gets, the more it's going to be someone else's fault. It's going to be an outside enemy, which goes right back into your presentation.
That's right. I mean, that's just the history of that part of the world. Anytime something goes wrong, blame Israel. And then also his recent history is things go bad, he goes and picks on the Kurds in the areas you were talking about earlier, northern Iraq, northern Syria, and they disagree with him, so they're terrorists. Anybody who disagrees with Erdogan is considered a terrorist. And so he opens up some military intervention on whoever. Now, the thing that's going to be real fascinating to watch is you got two different factions. Erdogan, they are Sunni Muslims, and Iran are Shia Muslims. Now, somehow in all of this, they're going to have to get their acts together, settle their differences, and that's where I think Putin's going to have some interesting times. If he is Gog, somebody's going to have to get the Sunnis and the Shias on the same page. And I think they'll be willing to forgive that, get some money out of the deal, and then unite in the boogeyman. Let's go after Israel, because that's one thing the Sunnis and the Shia both agree on. We need to get rid of Israel, throw them into the sea. So
you're going to see tolerance just go right out the window here.
Absolutely. And one common goal to get rid of somebody. Yeah, in Israel, you bet.
So the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right. And that's how it ultimately goes down. You look at the tail end of Revelation. It's like the whole world unites. Oh yeah, well let's go after this guy. And that's Jesus once he comes back down. The whole world wants to go declare war on him in the northern part of Israel, in the Valley of Megiddo. It doesn't work out too well for him, but that's the fundamental principle behind it.
Go to your very next slide. I think this is probably getting close to the end of them, but I think this is kind of wraps up what you've been talking about, does it not?
Absolutely. And this is the attitude that's going to be conveyed, led by Russia, and all these countries are going to be in the same boat. And it's the reason for the invasion is economic. They're all hurting economically, and they need resources, and they need money. And it's stated over and over. Just start counting that: to seize spoil, carry off plunder. There's 1 and 2. Acquired livestock and good who dwell in the center of the earth. Well, we'll touch a little bit. I think this has relevance in today's world. The ancient names of Sheba and Dedan. And if you overlay those on a modern day map, well, that's the Arabian Peninsula, and that is Saudi Arabia. And what's Saudi Arabia looking to do right now? They're looking to normalize relations with Israel. There's all kinds of rumors that they're going to be one of the next countries to join the Abraham Accords in peace with Israel and have economic ties. Well, they're not about to step in and stop Russia and friends from coming into the land. They'll stand there. The merchants of Tarshish. Tarshish is a very controversial thing. Some people think that may be England. A lot of the stuff I've seen talks about Tarshish being a colony of islands off the coast of what is modern day Spain. I mean, you can use it loosely as Western Europe. Some people would even say that the United States may even be involved in Tarshish. I don't know about that, but the bottom line, so you have the Arabian Peninsula, loosely Western Europe, and its leaders will say, have you come to see spoil? Have you assembled your host to carry off plunder, to carry away silver, gold, take away livestock, goods, to seize great spoil? They're just going to stand there. They're not going to do anything. And that's one thing that it speaks about in Ezekiel 39. The display of force is going to be overwhelming, so much to the point it talks about there will be 7 years worth of resources that have piled into the Middle East. Israel doesn't have to use any other resources other than what's left over from the military buildup, that they live off the energy, the fuel, the resources that were piled up against them for 7 years before they need to start using their own resources again. So,
well, it sounds like desperate times.
I think so. I think we got some time before we get there. Now, I could be way wrong about that. I just don't think the military buildup has hit the Middle East and in and around Israel like Scripture talks about. And especially if you just look like over this weekend, the type of armaments they pulled into Kazakhstan to quell that little rebellion. I mean, they sent train loads and planes full of tanks. The buildup they've got in and around the Ukraine on the north, the east-west border of the Ukraine between Russia and the Ukraine is crazy. The amount of stuff they're pouring into those parts of the world. So, you know, when they declare they're going to go after Israel, I think there'll be no doubt about it. They'll unload everything at it. So too, and that's the one thing too with Kazakhstan. It's like if you look at the coalition of countries, and that kind of fits in with this prophecy as well from Ezekiel. So they borrow Belarus, they go and they bought Russia's involved, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and I think 3 of the old stands, some of the old Soviet republics, plus Armenia, which goes back to where we started. So Armenia is even involved in some of the quote peacekeepers they're sending over there to Kazakhstan to help control the peace. Oh yeah, peacekeepers, by the way, have the license to shoot to kill from their leaders to impose the peace as they see fit. So,
well, we're going to see a lot of people leaving that area, I think, Paul. So you're going to have refugees going almost everywhere if this happens. So, Paul, let's wrap up. What do you think is going to be the final words on this?
I think it's still a little bit off. I think we're watching these things being put into place. I think it'll be fascinating. I think you're going to see Putin try to control the oil and gas flow to Western Europe. He wants to monopolize it. Ukraine and Israel stand in his way right now. I think he's trying to coalesce power, put the old Soviet Union back together. And I think it will not surprise me if Turkey has an economic collapse, Syria has an economic collapse, as well as Lebanon, and you see Putin step in or Russia step in economically, prop those places up, and he controls all of it. And then there's only one thing left that's keeping him from the monopoly, and that's Israel. That would be my best guess. Things change. Reserve the right to change my mind, in my opinion, pending the news. So.
Well, it was really interesting, Paul. We love that stuff, you know. So it's unfolding just as you and I have talked over the years. It's just unfolding right in front of us. So I'm going to say thank you so very much for spending some time with us today. We would love to do this again with you at the time as things unfold. We're watching Lebanon just kind of fall apart. That happened last year. It's gotten worse. They've been turning off the lights. We're watching Turkey unfold. Of course, Syria has been nothing but a basket case for many, many years. It's really a problem. So lots of these things that you're saying, Paul, are certainly coming to true, and we're going to keep our eyes on it. So thank you so very, very much for joining us today.
Hey, I appreciate the time and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Absolutely, Paul. It's great fun. Bye-bye now.
Hey, take care.